Hi, Tom and Greg. It's such a delight to have you here, and so looking forward to your upcoming workshop at the Trust on the 14th of June. And your workshop is Psychedelic Integration and Psychosynthesis. Big welcome. A big
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So what we've got a short amount of time just to look at the high points of your workshop. If you would care just to share a little bit around the clarity of the workshop and psychosynthesis.
Sure. Sure. Thanks, Kim. Thanks for having us. So yeah, the workshop's really about how to work or some ideas about how to work with psychedelic experiences as a psychosynthesis therapist. But I think many therapists from other modalities will also be able to use the kind of suggestions and tools and will hopefully benefit from the workshop. And the basic structure is we kind of start with an overview of what's happening in the psychedelic research field at the moment and kind of in the broader culture around the medicalization of psychedelics. Looking at some of the research that is happening in the UK and the US. Greg and I are doing some of that research, participating in some of that research as therapists. And then we'll look more at the theory of psychosynthesis and psychedelics and some ideas that, about how we can kind of look at a psychedelic experience through a psychosynthesis lens, looking at the egg model, things like that. And then in the second half, we move more into the practical dimensions of this work, looking at the ethics. What are some of the ethical considerations you need to think about if you're a practitioner working with people who have taken psychedelics, and then the final bit, we're doing some kind of case consultations and some case studies and really getting into the practical kind of elements of that. And there'll be an opportunity for participants to bring specific conundrums, or anonymized client material, and get some feedback either from us or from the wider group.
Wonderful. So we've had the wonderful opportunity of you speaking in the program team about some of the current research, and it's exciting stuff. It's not dull, and you, Greg and Tom, are working at the cutting edge of this work. It's still new in the world, so that's quite exciting to learn from people who are at the cold front of doing some important research and being involved in the world. When we were speaking earlier, you spoke about integration. If you'd like to share a little bit more with in this video for people to understand your view on integration and the wider perspective of it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think that, there can be some disagreement in terms of what integration is, and a lot of integration therapists wouldn't necessarily think that therapy is the same as integration. I personally kind of hold a view that it is, and that very simply, what we're doing as therapists is kind of, if you imagine we have this kind of like 95% unconscious world, and then we've got this like little 5% torch of consciousness that sort of that looks around and kind of identifies with what I am and who I am. And then they've got this 95% unconscious world, which is like all potential, right? Or of like, wow, who could I be, or where can I, what more could I know about myself? And I think, when you overlay that with psychedelics and think about the egg model, the oval diagram, and the kind of permutations around that and within it in terms of the higher unconscious and lower unconscious, what psychedelics you know, you could possibly theorize is that those permutations become thinner and the material flows around more within that within the psyche.
More fluidly, I guess.
So say that again?
More fluidly.
More fluidly, yeah. And sometimes, you know, depending on where you're going around in the, you know, the lower unconscious, it might feel quite dark and scary or difficult to look at and difficult to be with, and then obviously, and the same with the higher unconscious, like, oh my God, I've got all this potential, you know. And so, you know, really that's what we're doing, is trying to integrate that, whatever comes through from those experiences, like we kind of are on a daily basis anyway. But after a psychedelic experience, there's a lot more content has been kind of thrown into the middle awareness, you know, of like, oh my God, like what is all this material now that I've got to work with, you know?
Yeah, lovely. And I guess, you know, as we were speaking earlier, I guess this is more about making meaning, you know, continuing to make meaning and include our sense of self in that meaning making. Excellent. And we spoke about who it's for, and so people that are psychosynthesis therapists and therapists from other modalities can also use this model. Yeah.
I think it's quite important that you know, whatever modality participants come from, that they have some kind of framework that includes an unconscious mind, you know, so that that's included. I think if, yeah, our model might not make a lot of sense for someone that doesn't see the unconscious as being relevant or even existing, you know, and I know that there are models out there where, you know, that's not the case.
Yeah, and I guess finally, so Tom, this really continues your interest from your dissertation at when you did your master's, as it was at the trust, and Greg, you came across this material and it inspired you during that time, and I think that's quite exciting. That what you model for me is that learning can be inspiring and ongoing.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I think when I came back to the trust to do an MA, you know, met Tom and Rebecca Bandera, who were both doing their dissertations on integration. It was kind of like, you know, sign of the times in a way, and you know, and it's great that that kind of research can be done. And yeah, for me personally, you know, I'd had a lot of personal experience as a young man with psychedelic experiences, and you know, psychedelic integration wasn't really a thing that was being kind of bandied around in terms of like an idea of what to do. It was just kind of more of like a, you know, go out and see what happens, you know what I mean? Which is kind of, I suppose, you know, how a lot of people might come into the psychedelic world, but actually now there's this overlaying with psychotherapy and a therapeutic a sort of, you know, going along hand in hand with that. It's incredible to see the research that's being done.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, it reminds me that actually it's a step on from what the work that was going on in the 60s, where the work was very guided with the use of psychedelics.
Yeah.
Any final words?
No, just to say that we're hoping to see lots of people at the workshop and looking forward to it.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
I think we're very lucky to have you doing this workshop. It's well placed, and you are very experienced, great folks to be leading it. So I wish you well, and everyone who comes on. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.